I think one way to sum up what I'm talking about in these meetings and my writings is that ordinarily the things that human beings are looking for, whether that's in a more of a spiritual seeking kind of context, we're looking for God or enlightenment or awakening or liberation, or just in a human context, looking for happiness, well-being, and so on, love. It's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Um, yeah, the ordinary kind of consensus reality view of such matters, of finding what it is we're looking for, is that we're going to find what we're looking for, again, either in an ordinary human context or more spiritualized kind of context. We're going to find that in particular moments. We're going to find it in particular in the particularities. We're going to find it in particular states of mind, particular experiences, particular circumstances. Which of course is, you could say, what kind of fuels the search in the first place, because we imagine that what we're looking for isn't already here as this particular moment, right? Otherwise, why would we be looking for it? So we're envisioning, and maybe I've also heard from lots of different sources, that what we're looking for is not this. It lies somewhere else in some different experience. And then we'll have moments where we feel as if we've made contact with that, whatever the context of the search is, and I have what I'm looking for, or to some degree I've realized it, and then there's a sense of having lost contact with that, and then we go looking for it again. And this is very much, I know that experience as well as anyone. And what I'm proposing, just hold it as a hypothetical, I guess. But I invite you to check it out in your own experience. Do the experiment of testing out this hypothesis, and that is the possibility that what we're searching for is actually present, not in particular states and experiences and circumstances, but actually in all states, all experiences, all moments, all circumstances. And needless to say, that's a radically different perspective and understanding to come to see that that is the case. So how could we come to understand and see and realize that the possibility of the possibility of what we're looking for being present right now in this moment, no matter how the moment may be described or conceptualized? Well, right there is the key, that the distinctions that we make from this experience to that experience, from this moment to that moment, which sets us on that path of whatever it is we're looking for is present or absent, it's based on how we're describing things largely. We have to somehow discover another way of orienting to our experience that isn't merely driven by our descriptions and our designations of things. Otherwise, we'll only see distinction. So how would it make sense to say, oh, there's something that's present in all experience, when we look at experience and feel experience, what we see is this incredible diversity and multiplicity of experience, right? I mean, we have happy and we have sad moments, right? So what are you talking about? That there's a profound freedom and well-being and liberation that's present in both those states? Or what are you possibly talking about when they're obviously so distinct? And they are distinct. They're distinct flavors of experience, to use those two examples. So we have to look somewhere else other than the descriptions, which again are highlighting the ways in which experience is not the same from moment to moment to moment. So we could say, what is it that is common about each of our experiences? What is common about each moment of existence? That's where we can discover this possibility that I'm pointing to, this possibility that what we're looking for is in fact present in all experience. We have to find, as I put it, the common denominator at the basis of, or underlying, or informing or saturating every moment of existence. So clearly, again, the descriptions are not what's common about experience, other than the fact that experiences are being described. I introduce a number of different sort of doorways into discovering what the commonness, the common denominator of everything, of every experience. I'd just like to introduce a very, very simple one, which is unendingly powerful as a doorway. And that is to simply feel the absolute sheer presence of experience, which is undeniable and irrefutable. That the moment is here, isn't it? No matter how it's being described, something's always here. Something is always present. This presence that I'm speaking of is not a particular presence. It's not a presence that looks a particular way, is what I mean. It doesn't feel a particular way. It doesn't show up with a particular flavor. It shows up, we could say, as every flavor, as every texture, as every qualitative aspect of this reality, distinctive qualitative aspect. This presence is we could say, the primal underlying basis. What's so fundamental about every moment is that it is, right? This moment is. And this moment, of course, is not static. So its nature is seemingly to transform itself into its next version, its next description, its next flavor, its next quality. I mean, it's so on the move. It's just unfathomable how dynamic this is. I mean, already we've been together for 10 minutes and the range of phenomena that have been occurring is just unimaginable, isn't it? I mean, we've been all over the place experientially, just in 10 minutes. Feeling this, thinking that, wondering this, feeling body energies of all sorts of different sorts, but all of it present. So just take a few moments, we can do this together, and with eyes open or closed, it doesn't really matter. And just feel the presence of what is, the presence of the field of experience in all its unthinkable diversity and multiplicity. Feel the flow of it, the dynamism of it, the vitality of it. This is a presence that doesn't come and go, but not as some sort of static thing apart from the coming and going, like some screen on which all the coming and going is somehow being displayed on. I don't experience it this way. The presence actually is, this is a singularity. So the presence, this ever-present presence that doesn't come and go, shows up as everything that's coming and going. It's not two things. It's very paradoxical. It's this ever-present presence, the presence of what is, always here, continuous, never departing. There is always something here, isn't there? Feel that, feel the energy and aliveness of that, the power of that. Really the explosive power of this presence. And we could very much say that it is the absolute underlying fundamental basis of everything that we might be describing. No matter how we're describing, it's present, isn't it? A restless mind present, a quiet mind present, a moment of agitation present, a moment of calmness present. A sense of contraction present, a sense of expansive, boundless openness present. It's sort of like musically speaking, there's kind of a drone of presence. The drone in, thinking of Indian music, the tambura is just this drone of sounding, just this, there's no melody in the drone. It's just this constant tone, right? The drone. And yet the drone of presence, the persistent one note of presence, shows up as all the melodies and harmonies of life. If I were to use the metaphor of light for a moment to illustrate this invitation to focus on the presence of what is, often our attention is on, were we to say that life is like a light show, which in many ways it is, our attention is, not very understandably on what is being displayed, the particularities of the light show. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's the sense of it? And then often wondering how we are in relationship to that. Are we okay? Is it something that I want? Is it something that I dislike? Is it, this kind of constant, or almost kind of navigating and negotiating the light show in some way. And again, we sort of imagine that what we're looking for, the enlightenment or the just basic well-being and happiness, it looks like certain versions of the light show. That's our conventional sort of notion. I'm just inviting us to revel in, to appreciate, to just feel the miraculous reality that there even is a light show. Yet there even is light, the light of this presence, the illuminative nature of all of this. It is a light, isn't it? It is illuminated. No matter how the illumination might be appearing, just feel the presence of this light, the light of being, the light of presence, the light of what is. The light of experience is nourishing. The light itself is nourishing. It's absolute nourishment. It's the very thing that's fueling all of this, the mystery that's fueling all of this inconceivable radiance. The engine of reality, we could say. The force of reality. I mean, all of this distinctive experience, the range of human experience, every sensation, touch and sound and light, vision and thought and emotion and felt sense of energies that aren't capable of being put into language. All of this is springing forth, is exploding forth, isn't it? Dynamically. Right now, this instant is, this is the Big Bang, isn't it? This is creation. Every instant is the Big Bang, the very force of creativity of the universe, springing forth, bursting forth as this. And that energy, whatever that is, there's no word for it. There's no way to describe that in any possible way. Is present, isn't it? Even in great heartbreak and confusion. That is the energy and force of the cosmos showing up as that moment, isn't it? So we imagine, oh gosh, this moment is anything but what I'm looking for. It's anything but freedom. It's anything but God. It's anything but well-being. A difficult moment that we might describe as difficult or painful. From one perspective, totally understandable, but from the perspective of what it is more fundamentally, this presence of reality that it is, the energy of reality. It's this inconceivable, boundless, infinite engine of reality, isn't it? That's giving forth, that's springing forth as every instant, no matter how the instant's being described. So that's that invitation, is to feel that. Well, we are feeling that. In fact, that's all we're feeling, in a sense. The moment's always being felt. So you could say it's a gentle kind of shift from what we're feeling in terms of its specific definitions and details to the fact of feeling itself. The fact of feeling this moment. That's the presence. The feeling of this moment. Feel this moment. The presence of it. It never goes away, even though it's constantly going away and becoming the next version of itself. It becomes the next version of itself, but it never leaves itself. It's always itself. So reality is always reality, or we could say God is always God, no matter how God is showing up. So there's no escaping it, because it's the only thing that exists. I'll read you this little piece I wrote, and then maybe we'll open up for some conversation about this. I don't know why there's something evocative to me about this feeling of this being a kind of shining forth. It's got a lot of things in it that it feels like it's shining. That's the sense of this moment. It's shining because it's illuminated. A moment is, by definition, experience is illuminated, isn't it? The wakefulness is inseparable from experience, so it's illuminated, it's known. And it has this quality of movement, of activity, of energy, the Shakti of this moment. And so I love the term the shining forth, and that's what I titled this little piece, if I can find it. Oh yes, I know where it is. It's called Everything is the Shining Forth. Every experience, and the real key thing here is that everything means everything. In other words, nothing's excluded. So everything, we could just stay with that one word, everything. Every experience is a universe of ultimately indescribable, unresolvable qualities and characteristics. So that's all I need to say right there. Every experience is a universe of ultimately indescribable, unresolvable qualities and characteristics. This is also what's common about all experiences, its unresolvable, indeterminate nature. As true of happiness as it is of sadness, as true of contraction as it is of expansion. Experiential phenomena are so fluid, paradoxically here and present, at the same time unfindable and ungraspable, never quite taking clear shape or form, owing to their relentlessly shape-shifting nature. It's very curious. It's like it absolutely seems like this takes form and hangs out as form in some kind of static, stable way. And yet it doesn't. It doesn't actually hold still. This is what's so curious. It looks like it does, is very convincing. The stability, the seeming stability of things is kind of convincing in many respects. But if we look with some care and curiosity, we can see that no, it's not holding still. It's gone no sooner than it appears. Each momentary flash of life, even those moments we find challenging to navigate, are at the same time a vast and bottomless sea, constantly moving and shifting like the tides. This discovery reveals that even those experiences we conventionally think of as problematic are actually astonishingly rich, luscious movements of life itself. Every moment, regardless of its conventional label, is nothing less than the mysterious, inexplicable shining forth of reality. That's the distinction I was making between what the light, what is it, what's showing up on the screen, what does it look like? Oh, I like that appearance. I don't like that appearance. That one I'm kind of, neutral about. That's what we might describe it to be like, the light, the form the light is taking. And this gentle shift from that orientation to just notice that there is light and that this light is shining forth as all the different appearances and apparitions that we call life and the experience of life. Every moment, regardless of its conventional label, nothing less than the mysterious, inexplicable shining forth of reality. To be sure, certain experiences can bring us to our human knees. And yet, from another vantage, those same difficult experiences can be realized to be the most exquisitely beautiful mystery and miracle. The bottomless bottom line is that every experiential phenomena is so far beyond anything we could ever imagine or conceive of it to be. That's probably a good stopping point to open up and see what's on your minds with respect to what I'm talking about and exploring with all of you. So I'm happy to hear what's happening for you over there as far as this investigation.
Just a thought.
Hi,
It's really only a mystery to the mind or to conception. Beyond that, it's obvious. It's just here. It's no mystery. It's just
yeah. The mystery, what I mean when I use that word is the paradox, if you will, of things being obviously present and findable, and yet also unfindable in the sense of not being able to pin down and get to the bottom of what this actually is, what it is fundamentally. I just can't find that bottom. I can't come to the, okay, well, what is Ed or who is Ed? I'll just look and look and look and look and look, and I'll never ever arrive at like the final landing place of like knowing who Ed is, because Ed is infinite and unfathomable, as is every other apparent phenomena. That's what I mean by mystery. So in a sense, what you are remains a mystery. It remains beyond the reach of my grasp of knowing because of its infinite nature. I can't put it in a, I can't bound it up in any definition. That's what I mean by mystery. Yeah. But yes, that's the wild thing, is it's like, it's there's an obviousness that's in our face all the time, the obviousness of what's present, in a sense, or that something is present. But getting to the bottom of what it is, well, anybody's guess, including the physicist. I was really feeling this strongly this morning, reflecting on it. You know, that often what happens is sort of something just arises for me that seems particularly present as a kind of an aspect of the jewel of this mystery. And what was really very palpably present was just the kind of the power and the potency of presence, of what's here. It's just that there's that sense of like the explosive nature of it, the powerful nature of it. It's just, you know, it's the power that lights the sun, the power that lights the consciousness that's here somehow, miraculously, inexplicably. I mean, it's just unthinkable, the power that's here in every instant. The instant is the evidence of its power, of its creative force, and yeah, it's something else. And that's never not the case, no matter how it's looking. And we're not apart from that power. I mean, that is the power. It's a singularity, showing up as whatever we imagine ourselves to be, showing up as mind, as body, as personality, as all of it.
We seem to have an explanation for the static appearance, in that we think when we move our head,
Mm-hmm.
the world doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you take that idea out,
Mm-hmm.
the world is always changing. There's never a static experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't typically get into the sort of thorny philosophical questions about, is there a world apart from our perception? Because I was just listening to a debate between these two spiritual teachers about that, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that debate. But I do find that what we can really know with certainty is that perceiving, what we could call perceiving or experiencing, is occurring. And clearly what we think of as a world that might exist, you know, theoretically exists outside of our perceiving, is known through our perceiving. So the perceiving of this room is absolutely dynamic. It's not holding still, the room I'm sitting in. So I could say the room's outside of me, but it's funny because even the perception of it being outside, seemingly, of me, I'm a subject in a room that's outside of me, the bounds of me, is like, it's a perception. And as a perception, it's absolutely vital and alive and not static. And so actually the room is changing, inseparably so, from the changing flow of perceiving that's if you will, registering this thing called room. So yeah, so it's dynamism everywhere. And even if you look at a so-called static material world that one might argue is sitting out there somehow unchanging, even if we're moving our heads or thinking different thoughts about it, it's kind of holding still. I mean, even at a materialistic level, that's bullshit, because we know that no, the things aren't just sitting there holding still. All this apparently still matter is sparkling and scintillating and vibrating. And so what's actually static? Right. Doesn't seem like anything is. Which incidentally is part of a very big reason why, and I talk about this often, the whole game of defining can be seen to be an impossible, albeit still useful thing to do, because how do you define something that's alive? Which version of it are you defining? The version that's here right now that just changed into something else? How do you define it? It's gone the moment you've defined it. It turned it into something different, hasn't a different version of itself. So you can't, the defining can't keep up with the transformative nature of this, with the morphing nature of reality. So much for defining.
Yeah, it only works if you ignore a bunch of stuff.
If you ignore the, exactly, and then that's how we have a world of seeming nouns, which is to ignore the actual activity that's intrinsic to everything. You don't really have nouns. I mean, not an actual experience, because in that sense, you don't have things. You have activity, it would seem, dynamism, although that's difficult to pin down and define as well. But as it turns out, as everything else is.
Hi, John.
Hey, Bill. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Many spiritual teachers, at some point in their teaching, will talk about the importance of, at some point, coming to terms with the religion that you were brought up with as a child. Many of us had negative experiences as children. And I think the idea is that at some point, that negativity needs to be integrated in some way.
Do you find that to be, and mind you, this is a general comment for everyone, but to make the inquiry, in our time together very personal. So for example, that could be an interesting question, whether that's something that spiritual teachers sort of in general should maybe address or maybe do address. But in the case of you, is it something that you find yourself bumping up against for yourself in terms of reckoning with your own spiritual history, and that feels in any way to be operating as some sort of obstacle for you, or something that you're just finding yourself having to navigate?
That particular issue is something that I have navigated in my past. But from a certain point of view, our lifetime can be understood as a series of lifetimes or chapters.
Sure.
And there's another chapter that came later in my life. And I do find that 2021 so far has been, the central theme of it has been to integrate this particular chapter in the past with your point of view. I spoke about this, the last time we
How
met.
you found yourself more recently gravitating to kind of a devotional sort of bhakti kind of yoga, if you will, orientation, which is something that had been, I know, an important part of your life in an earlier incarnation. And how are you finding that integration? Is it something that you're finding a connecting point for yourself around what I'm speaking about and your own sort of inclination to approach this in a kind of a devotional way?
I feel like I am approaching that integration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's helpful to talk about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say that in many respects, feeling into the way reality is in the ways that I'm describing, and just its astonishingly, transcendently beautiful, unthinkably amazing nature. There's really no words. It's right. You're left with poetry at a certain point to try to capture. I mean, come on. This is just, it truly is awe-inspiring, isn't it? And I think that there can be a natural sort of movement of loving that, in the same way that you see great beauty in the natural world or in another person, and there's a natural kind of love and devotion towards that somehow, and appreciation of that, and awe of that, and gratitude for that. So I think it's very natural, in a sense, to sort of feel a kind of devotional. I mean, everyone's different, of course, in terms of how prominent or not such a felt sense might be when one encounters reality more primally, if you will, in the ways I'm talking about. But I feel it in myself, certainly, that there's a, my sharing on the Sunday Zooms feels like an expression of that love affair in a certain way. My love affair with this incredible reality that we find ourselves being and partaking of, if you will. And now, as to whether or not adopting a kind of devotional stance towards or orientation to it is a way to become more familiar with it and more intimate with it, I don't know. I mean, I'm agnostic about that. I think the proof is in the pudding for each person in terms of what they find. Like, I think I maybe said to you before when we chatted about this, that, if you find that, say, if you go back to what I was presenting at the outset, that and I would believe that this is the fundamental purpose of the devotional paths, is not to remain in a place of being separate and imagining oneself separate from that which they're devoted to, i.e. God or Jesus or Krishna or whoever they're expressing their devotion towards, or the Divine Mother or whatever. It's to realize the inseparability. I mean, that's the cornerstone of all the contemplative traditions, the recognition of the singularity of this. So if one finds that their devotional practices are evoking that sense of that recognition of that one is none other than, that Atman is Brahman, not that Atman is just in devotion to Brahman, but that Atman is Brahman, then I'm like all for it, I think the potential in those practices is to continue to maintain an ultimately false sense of separation. So I'm this limited human and I'm in devotion to the unlimited divine. And we can, in that orientation, miss that what we're made of is the unlimited. What else could we possibly be made of but the unlimited divine? And so that's kind of how I see it. It's very pragmatic, if we find it working in that regard, then by all means, whatever we find moving us in that direction. Now, some people might be approaching devotional practices or any other practice without that context that I'm talking about, and it might be, I just love feeling like I'm a human and I'm in devotion to something non-transhuman, in God or whatever, and that's enjoyable to them and inspires them, and wonderful. But at least in terms of what I'm talking about something different, obviously, in the sense of discovering there's one thing here. Call it God, call it reality, call it existence, call it the absolute. There's one thing. And it appears as many things. And that would include each one of us. And that's what we are. That's what we're made of. And every experience is made of that, which is what I was sort of guiding us into that exploration. So again, if you find that your devotional practices are helping you to evoke or deepen that understanding, which I think you already have in very profound ways through all the conversations you and I have had, then wonderful. Or, at one level, you might also just enjoy it, as you might enjoy something else that you find meaningful and enriching. And yeah, I don't know if that's helpful at all, hearing that, but
that is helpful. It reminds me of an experience I had back in the day when Krishna, in fact, was my Ishta Deva, my chosen form of God.
Mhm.
I had a Bhagavad Gita blog online at the time, and I became friends with the librarian of the town that I lived in, or one of the librarians. And so I got to know him that way, but then it came out that I was doing this Gita blog, and it turned out that he used to be in the Prabhupada lineage,
Mhm.
The Hare Krishna people. And he'd actually been right there in New York City when Prabhupada showed up penniless on a corner. So he was there right from the beginning. He later got disillusioned. I think it was when the story came out that a Krishna temple in West Virginia, they were stockpiling guns. And what often happens when these organizations get big, they get out of control.
I remember having a conversation once in an airport back in the day when you would sometimes meet the Hare Krishnas and with their literature, and the conversation didn't go real well. I basically was offering the perspective that you are the same as Krishna to this person. That's what you are fundamentally, and that was not that I was deluded, basically, apparently, with that understanding. But anyway, I don't want to get off in a conversation about that tradition, or any tradition for that matter. But yeah, I think whether we're talking about any spiritual practice that one might be engaged in, you're talking about devotional practices or meditation or something. It's like I do have a particular perspective that I'm sharing here, which is that certainly well known to you because of our many interactions and your reading of my stuff. But so if it's a meditation practice or a prayer practice or a chanting practice or a yoga practice, or I do feel that at least from my perspective, the real kind of deepest, most radical intent of these practices is, yoga, what does the word mean? It's union, right? So it's the discovery of the fundamental union of everything, the singularity, right? So again, if a practice like yoga, or in all the different forms that yoga can take, is one is finding that practice is awakening them to somehow, the engagement with it is awakening that understanding, I'd say carry on. But but I do, from my own experience, my own engagement with many different spiritual practices, for me, even though they were contextualized, they were talked about in terms of these very lofty notions of oneness and enlightenment and so on, I felt, and maybe it was my own way I engaged with them or the way that they were being taught and held, that they had a tendency to reinforce separation more than cut through separation. That was just my experience. It doesn't have to be that way, obviously. I mean, I'm certainly inviting certain kinds of practices, if you will, and inquiries. I call them experiential inquiries, and that's what this meeting is. And if it's something about our engaging with one another in this format can help to cut through these notions that the world is made of pieces fundamentally, when actually it's fundamentally not made of pieces, even though it shows up as pieces, well, then I'm all for this kind of spiritual practice, if you will, of coming together in this way. Yeah, I'll say, I'll kind of leave it there. But, yeah, but thanks for that. And you know, because of our background, it's something you and I can always explore too, kind of offline, in terms of, because I know it's something that's up for you. But
Thank you, John.
yeah, thanks, Bill.
You know, ultimately, these practices are mysterious and undefinable also.
Yes, indeed. Very well said. Yep. Yeah, one time I wrote something like, the real meditation, the deepest meditation, is to find out what meditation actually is, which is the same question that I'm always asking, which is, what is this? So I have this word for this thing where I sit down, or one sits down on a wherever chair or cushion and does something. It's like, well, what is it actually? I mean, really, what is this? This is the great question. What is this? Not an intellectual, analytical question, but an experiential one. And then you can discover that meditating and not meditating are the same thing, fundamentally. Same light show, looks different. I mean, this is meditation. And when the Zoom call ends, that will be meditation. The meditation of what is, I call it. Hey, Chris. I don't know if you were going to
Hey,
say.
John.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
hey, I'm sorry, I'm on my camera today.
No worries.
My phone, and it's it doesn't work, but
Yeah, nice to hear you.
I was good to see you. Yeah. I just wanted to say I'm actually with my 2.5-year-old boy right now, and he's just walking around asking what everything is too. So it
There
doesn't
you
seem
go.
like much.
That's right. That's what the 2-year-old does.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So,
Yeah. Well, you know what's really cool is I'll sometimes point this out too, that you know, the 2-year-old like hasn't seen it anything before, right? So the question is a very understandable one, like, what is this? I've never seen it before. I like to remind people that this is always the case. Like, you've never seen this before. We have this complex, you know, brain activity going on that suggests that we have a prior reference point to know what this moment is, right? That's our knowledge. That's the, yeah, your knowledge of what this moment is. But do you know what this moment is? Have you ever encountered this moment? No, you have not. I mean, unless we go back into memory and say, what's the reference point for this? Oh yeah, room. I'm familiar with this room. I've been here before. I think it was Pink Floyd. Didn't they say, we have not been here before? We have not. Not here. Sorry, go ahead. I digress.
that's. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, enjoy that 2.5-year-old. It's precious.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Isn't
Except
that
you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven.
Indeed.
isn't that when they start saying no, no?
Yeah. Yes.
Can't we just say no, no?
Yes. They discover that they're seemingly a self separate from the world around them.
And that reminds me of a little saying Adia has, that if the ego could say one thing, it would say no.
Yeah. Well, you know what, one aspect where that has, I've seen it in my own kind of life course is in relationship to what I was sharing earlier, that you know, I said when I was reading that everything is a shining forth, I said, I could just stop with the word everything, and everything means everything, like everything. So where this can get very interesting in our own lives, or you could say the rubber kind of starting to hit the road, so to speak, around when we encounter certain moments, is like, yeah, but it's not that. That's not freedom. That's not presence. That couldn't be God, that moment, that circumstance, that event. Then there's a real opportunity to go, well, let me check it out and let me see, you know, that's the kind of the no. It's like, it couldn't be that. It's like, but it is that. Nothing's left out, you know, every wave is an expression of the ocean of existence. And this is the funny thing, it really struck me, I'll say it again, I think I said it last week, that I was playing within myself with that metaphor of the wave and the ocean. I had this sense of like, isn't it interesting that we get visited by certain experiential waves? And we have this idea, you know, if we're like interested in the kind of stuff we're exploring here you all are, obviously you're interested in it. And it's like, I want to get to that ocean of infinite, you know, spacious, divine, whatever. And so this wave wave is somehow an obstacle, or it's evidence that I've lost touch with that somehow. So I'm going to do something to regulate, modulate, manipulate, control the wave to sort of basically to turn it into the ocean. But it is the ocean. So it's kind of funny, isn't it? If I could just change this wave to make it's already 1,000% made of nothing but the ocean. So that's why there's no need to change experience. That's why the practice of allowing experience to be as it is can be so potent, because it can cut through the tendency we have to have a hierarchy of experience based on our descriptions. This is better than that. This is higher than that. This is more awake than that. This is more divine than that. This is blah, blah, blah. And so what can happen when we just relax that habit of elevating certain experiences over other, privileging certain moments over others, and instead make no effort to modify what's here, that can be one sort of powerful doorway into this discovery of the equalness of all experience, the fundamental presence of every experience. It can be harder to recognize that when we're busy trying to screw around with it and make it different. Because essentially we're saying it's not good enough as it is. It's not divine enough as it is. It's not awake enough as it is. So I'm going to make it better. It's an understandable impulse from within that, the perspective of defining the world in the ways that we do. It's like, it makes sense. Like, yeah, I want to take this painful thing and turn it into something less painful and more pleasurable. Fair enough. And nothing wrong with that way of orienting to things, but there's another option too, which is to discover something that transcends those descriptions, or those distinctions.
Let me ask you something, John. In the context of, you know, I've read your books, but in the context of the way you present things, do you ever use the metaphor of the heart
Usually not. I don't know if that's necessarily intentional. I just don't tend to, but I could sort of conjure up a reason why I might not. And that is that I think it can just be an extremely misleading, confusing term that people might associate with particular parts of the body, or particular, like somehow the emotions of the heart are somehow more real and more true and more authentic than the mind, or it can, I don't know, I just think it can be misleading. I mean, where the word resonates for me is sort of the heart of what is, in the sense of the center of what is, the centerless center of what is, the core of what is. In that sense, I connect with the notion of heart, but not in some sort of fuzzy kind of, I don't know, emotional sort of, I mean, reality feels just intrinsically heartful somehow to me, but if I were to use that word, which I don't tend to, but it feels that way. It feels very warm and at its basis and loving. Yeah.
It is Valentine's Day, you know.
Yes, I did mention it a little earlier before you hopped on, but yeah, it is. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's one could say that one of the sort of primal qualities of reality is it's sort of love nature. It's harmonizing kind of nature. It's intimate nature. It's yeah, it's an extraordinary, yeah, it's an extraordinary thing. And to your earlier question, mysterious as well. All the many forms it can take.
Something you said a couple of minutes ago about there's nothing wrong with trying to cultivate experiences of well-being.
For sure. I do it all
But
the time.
there's another option. And one way of describing the integration I'm aiming at is to, instead of saying but, saying and.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. The all-inclusive nature of this is one of its hallmark qualities, because it's all inclusive of anything, because it is everything. So it makes room. That would be one way I would think of, love in a very profound sense. It's all inclusive, nature. And yeah, absolutely. You can't really get it wrong. You can't get it wrong because just can't get it wrong.
How reassuring is that?
Very reassuring. Yeah, it was really dawning on me the other day. I was listening, Bill, to our friend Peter, and I was just feeling something, and then he started speaking to it, and it was this sense of how all these things in spirituality that we're trying to move away from towards something else, like I'm trying to move away from identification towards non-identification, or I'm trying to move away from thought towards that which isn't thinking. I'm trying to move away from separation to the indivisible. I'm trying to move away from self-identity to freedom from self-identification, on and on and on. And we move from bondage to liberation, right? This is kind of it's the way it often gets framed and the way we often approach it. And just more and more and more, it's just apparent to me that it's not really like that. It's not moving from one state that's inferior to a superior state. It's recognizing that what we call identification or contraction or bondage is not actually that. Like liberation is discovering that bondage doesn't exist. That's why we can't go wrong. We can't, we're never cast out of the only thing that exists. So how can we go wrong? So it's like, it's never, it's a wild thing. It's a wild thing. It's like, because this is not resolvable, it's not definable, then these definitions of missing it and not seeing it, in a sense, it's very paradoxical. We can come to recognize that. I never ever understood this when reading like Dzogchen, Tibetan Buddhist masters like Longchenpa, where they would say that the recognition of the nature of reality is the same as the non-recognition. I'd be like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense now, but it didn't then. Because what we're calling non-recognition is the fundamental ground of being. What else could it be? That's the cutting through, that recognition. And in a sense, that is a kind of recognition, to see that. So it's very paradoxical, and it might sound like I'm speaking like a crazy person when I don't mean to play word games with it, but I think the difference, if there's a difference, is that not seeing the equalness of all experience, the fundamental equalness of it in terms of its indescribable, ever-present nature, its Shakti, as I was saying earlier, its power. Not seeing that for the humans we seem to be, then we don't get to appreciate that. We don't get to partake of the benefit of seeing that, of recognizing that. That's really, because in a sense, you're already the absolute reality, you're already divinity, because there's nothing but. So you could say, well, why even engage in a conversation like this then? Like, there's no point in doing it because I'm already that, which is true. But this recognition that you are that absolute reality, because what else could you be? It's like there's like an implication, a flavor of implication that comes along with that for the human, which feels very full and nourishing and inspiring and just so lovely. And yeah, so in that sense, it's like, well, it's kind of like recognizing that you live in a colorful world doesn't suddenly make the world colorful. It just allows you to appreciate the fact that it is colorful, but it's always been colorful. And if you don't recognize it, it's still colorful. It's not a great analogy, but it's kind of like, well, if you look for a moment and see, wow, you live in a colorful world, Bill, or everyone else, it's like, oh my God, I get to appreciate the colorful nature of reality just by noticing it. So noticing that everything is pure presence, the presence of what is, you can start to appreciate that. You can start to enjoy the bounty of that in a way that maybe we aren't appreciating to the same degree because we're imagining that it's not here, It's like I wrote many years ago, we overlook the miracle that lies before us because we keep looking for it somewhere else. So we don't get to partake of this miracle. There's no other miracle. This is the miracle. If we imagine it somewhere else, then we might miss that it's this, right? That it's this. So, yeah. I know there's a couple of, not to put anyone on the spot, but I know there's a couple of folks I don't think I've had on the calls before. Well, you're welcome to share anything or explore anything with me. I'm always happy to hear from people, but no pressure.
there's a story about Krishna when he was a young man. He was a cowherd, and there were all these cowherd girls called gopis who were madly in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
And one day they were bathing in the Yamuna River. They'd taken off all their clothes, laid them on the bank, and gone bathing. And Krishna sneaks up and snatches all their clothes, retreats to a nearby tree, hangs the clothes on the branches beneath him, and then climbs up into the tree. So he's right above all their clothes. And eventually one of them realizes what's happened, and they're stuck in the water. And the meaning of the story is that Krishna is transcendental consciousness. The gopis are the jivas, the individual consciousness. And the water is Maya, the illusion of separation. So that even though they can see their beloved Krishna, God is so near to them, still they don't come out of the water. If one of them comes out of the water, there's the recognition that it's all one, and there's nothing to be shy or
ashamed of.
Yes.
And what do the clothes represent?
What would the clothes represent?
The things that we imagine we must have to protect ourselves.
Yes,
to shield ourselves, the armoring.
Yeah.
But we're all naked. We're all actually, I wrote a poem many years ago called Hearts Without Skin. We're all completely exposed. 1,000% exposed. There's no shielding ourselves because it's just pure intimacy. You know, they already are the universal consciousness. You can't shield yourself from it. You can't pull it off. You can't make yourself less than what you actually are. How could you do that? Or God or Krishna or whatever can't make him or herself less than. It can seem that way. It can certainly seem, and most of us have the sense of being limited and bound. But if we look, and that's what my work is all about, is look and see if in fact you can find limitation. Can you find boundary? Can you find definability? And you can't find it, which reveals that it isn't actually what you think it is, that the limitation is not actually limitation. It's not, and just feel that, feel this moment and how unlimited it is, how it won't be put in a box of limitation and definition and description. Feel how explosively, transcendentally, wildly free it is of any effort to box it in and close it in, clothe it in any particular way, define it in any particular way. It really is explosively transcendental.
It reminds me of the Gordian knot, that, you know, at any point we could take the sword or we can keep trying to unravel it by step and get involved with it.
Yeah, the knot's funny, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you say like life is like there's just life, and then there's this experience of these things called like something gets knotted or stuck, or so I want to try to untie the stuck thing, but the knot's made of the very thing that we're looking for. So we can go ahead and try to untie knots if that would feel better, in some way to do that. But it's not necessary. There's not actually a knot there. It just looks like it. There's one. And it can be convincing. It looks like I'm stuck in a human body, navigating this crazy mixed up world and all my difficult experiences and circumstances. Seems that way. You're telling me it's not that way? Yes. I am. I mean, recognizing that it can't be collapsed into those definitions doesn't negate, in some sense, like seeing that there's no time and space doesn't negate what shows up as time and space. It's just like recognizing that there's no separation here. There's no division anywhere. Doesn't negate the experience of individuality, seemingly. It doesn't seem to negate it in my experience. Like I can still feel the sense of being an individual apart from other individuals. Like that's still there. And yet I can just look and see that it doesn't really hold up under scrutiny.
So that reminds me of these figures that sort of have two different views, like the vase that has two people looking at each other.
Exactly. One image, but yeah, it's like one reality, and like how many, I'll talk about the kaleidoscopic nature of this, and how many different ways can you turn the kaleidoscope on this single thing called life, called reality, called this moment, and it can appear so many different ways. Just a little shift this way and a little shift that way, and well, what is it really? Is it one view or a million, billion, trillion different views? And then the view, the view that I'm emphasizing is the view or the perspective that recognizes that none of the perspectives can really capture what's here, which is itself in a way another perspective. I was going to try to find this piece from, we were talking about ever-present presence, and I was going to see if I can find this and read it to you. Maybe you might enjoy it. I'll go ahead and read this to you if that's okay. I think it's well, before I do that, let me see if anyone, I don't want to keep anyone from sharing that might want to pose a question or explore something with me. I can blather on, but before I do that. This is called Everything is Present. It's more or less what I was saying at the outset, but somehow I never tire of hearing it, so I hope you don't. Our attention is typically focused on the qualitative differences we encounter in life. That's hot, that's cold, that's easy, that's difficult, that's clarifying, that's confusing, that's exciting, that's boring, that's comfortable, that's uncomfortable. But however natural it may be for us to do this, an unintended consequence is that we end up expending considerable effort trying to secure more of the moments we equate with our definitions of happiness and avoid or escape those we imagine will keep us from it. Unfortunately, we're frequently unable to create or hold in place the moments we consider positive, or keep at bay those we deem negative or undesirable. But there's an alternative to this all too familiar dynamic. For these next few moments, rather than emphasizing the particular content or flavor of experience, simply feel the presence of it. If what you label as comfort is here, feel the presence of that. If discomfort is what's arising, then feel its presence. There's no need to favor one thing over another. Quiet mind, that's what's present. Busy mind, present. A sense of unease, present. A sense of feeling unbounded and free, present. See the bird in the tree, present. Hear the roar of traffic outside, present. Feel as if you're somehow not understanding this? No problem. That's just what's present. See, there's no doing this right. There's simply what's present. And that can never be lost, even if what's present is forever slipping away, becoming the next thing that's present. And so for these next few moments, instead of emphasizing how things are appearing, just notice the fact that they even are appearing. The simple but astounding reality of their presence. I mean, is this incredible? Like that something's appearing. Isn't that amazing? It doesn't matter how the moment is showing up, just notice that it's showing up, that it's present, and that this presence is continuous, even if its permutations are forever changing. See that you never have to bring yourself back to presence, because wherever you may venture within the vast field of experience, presence announces its presence as that very experience. I just love that. Presence announces its presence as every experience. That's why reality is the great, it's like, you want to be present, then just notice that that's what reality is doing, is being present. See, reality is always better at everything. Reality is masterful at everything. It's masterful at being awake. You want to be awake? Notice that reality is awake, isn't it? Here it is, awake, awakeness, just here, effortlessly. Presence, here, effortlessly. Presence need not be achieved or practiced, but simply noticed as the unavoidable reality of every instant. And should you feel as if you have somehow failed to notice this, well, then that's exactly what will be present.
Thanks, John. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, good to see you, Ed. Thank you. Well, maybe we'll end on that note. Lovely to be with all of you. Thank you for joining. And anyone that ever is moved to make a contribution, you're welcome to do that. No need to, but you're welcome to it. You can just do it via PayPal. My email address, which is john@johnastin.com. And I hope to see some of you down the road. Wish you a beautiful day, and take good care of yourselves. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.